Hello and welcome back, everyone. Thank you very much for tuning back in again. This is a screencast-o-matic presentation and recording for the part of the lesson that has us looking at contemporary issues with interest groups and contemporary issues in society. So let's go ahead and begin with this reading here by first prefacing the title. Should women have to register for the draft? Keeping in mind here that there are several interest groups that exist in our government and society that champion women's rights. But how far should the level and fight for equality go? That's the question I want you to consider while we dissect this issue. Here's some background, and then we'll get to the both conflicting sides of this debate. Please remember that you're to answer the key concept questions as they appear, and then provide your response at the bottom using supporting detail. Let's get started. The military draft ended in 1973, when the U.S. converted to an all-volunteer armed forces. A draft could be revived, however, if the U.S. ever faced a grave military threat. That's why young men who just turned 18 still must register with the Selective Service, the federal agency responsible for implementing a draft. In 1981, the Supreme Court ruled in Roxter v. Goldberg that women shouldn't have to register. At the time, women were barred from combat, so drafting them made little sense. Well, in 2015, the Pentagon decided to allow women in combat if they could meet the same requirements as men. Does that mean it's time to require women to register for the draft? Here's one side of the debate. Yes, women should have the same obligation as men to register with the Selective Service. If we want equality for women, we must recognize that rights come with responsibilities. Currently, all American men ages 18 to 25 must register with the Selective Service so that they may be drafted into the military in times of national need. But women have no similar requirement. Since women have served in key roles in the military for decades, this disparity makes little sense. It has been particularly unfair since 2015 when combat roles in the U.S. military were officially open to anyone who could meet the physical requirements, regardless of gender. Since then, the women who have graduated from Army Ranger School have shown that gender is not a barrier to military combat service. Last year, lawmakers tried to include a provision in the defense spending bill requiring women to register for the draft. Unfortunately, the version of the bill that eventually passed did not include this change. But lawmakers like myself who believe strongly that this is the right thing to do will continue to propose this change in the future. While we're discussing how to make the Selective Service more fair, we should also talk about how to make it more meaningful. We need a national service requirement for all young people, not just a system for drafting them into the military. Such a requirement could include working in public schools, rebuilding infrastructure, or environmental conservation projects. It will be an investment both in young people and in our country. I will continue to argue that women's obligations should mirror those of men. And as women have proved for generations, the desire and willingness to serve in our nation's military is not limited by gender. Women are equal citizens of this nation, and with equal responsibility to answer the call to military service in times of great national need. So that side of the debate is from Congresswoman Jackie Speer, a Democrat from California. Now let's go to the conflicting viewpoint here and dissect this argument. No, the Selective Service is about national security in a time of catastrophic emergency, not women's rights. The system, which currently registers all 18 to 25-year-old American men, is a relatively low-cost insurance policy that serves as a backdrop to America's all-volunteer military. If there were a devastating attack on America, perhaps from multiple directions, the need to fight back might exceed the capability of our volunteer military. If Congress approves legislation to register women for the draft, then any call for draftees would have to include women in equal numbers. This would be counterproductive. Most women who serve in the U.S. military are not on the front lines of combat. They serve mostly in support roles. But the purpose of military conscription, which would be put into effect only during a national emergency, isn't to add support troops. Its purpose is to replace troops killed or wounded in battle. So, the draft is about national security in an emergency, not women's rights. Theories about equality break down here. Because of physical differences that will not change, the Selective Service system would have to divert scarce time and resources to evaluate and train thousands of women just to find the small percentage who might be minimally qualified for fighting units such as the infantry. Even though some exceptional women might qualify, the fact remains that most women cannot meet physical standards for combat units while most men can. Instead of concentrating on men who can be rapidly trained to fight in combat, a draft that included women would simply jam up the process of creating a battle-ready force. It would weaken, not strengthen, military readiness in a time of national emergency. Patriotic women have always served their country in times of national emergency, and they always will. But requiring women to register for the draft would create a political crisis and a paralyzing administrative overload that would weaken our armed forces at the worst possible time. We shouldn't do it. And so that's from Elaine Donnelly, who's president for the Center of Military Readiness. And now's your time. Think about what you think and provide a response. Here are some interesting facts and statistics before you do so, from By the Numbers. 15.9% is the percentage of today's U.S. armed forces that are women. Almost 1.3 million women serve in the U.S. military. 147 is the number of women in the U.S. military who've been killed since 2001 in the wars in Afghanistan from 2001 to the present, and Iraq since 2003 to 2011. 1973 is the year that the last American was drafted into the military. So once again, with those numbers and with everything we talked about in the reading in mind, now's your time to take aside and provide an explanation of your stance. Thank you very much for tuning in, and good luck with completing the rest of the lesson.